This is Buffalo State Data Talk, the podcast where we introduce you to how data is used and explore careers that involve data.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Buffalo State Data Talk. I am your host, Brian Barry, and thank you for joining us today. Today we'll be talking to Ray Givler, a senior decision support consultant at Highmark, a healthcare company. Thanks for joining us today, Ray.
Sure. Glad to be here.
Awesome. All right, so could you start us off by giving us a general overview of the work you do as a lead senior decision support consultant?
Sure. I do a lot of data visualization in Tableau. That's my main duty. And that's kind of end-to-end on that, from eliciting requirements and then iterative development, data prep, validation, pushing that final dashboard to server, and then ongoing maintenance of those same dashboards. I also mentor junior developers on my team, as well as some others through the internal Tableau users group. I do demos and tips and tricks occasionally on that.
Now that we have an idea of what you do, can you tell me about what a typical day or week looks like for you?
Well, my schedule varies a lot. The beginning and end of the week are freer for me to actually get stuff done, meaning, heads down in Tableau and building vizzes. And the middle of the week tends to have more meetings.
Cool. So you told us that you work with a team of people. How would you say your time is split between working with your team and working independently?
Well, outside of meetings, there's very little work we do on the development side as group work. We support each other when we're stuck, and we tend to work in separate dashboards there. So each person's kind of doing their own thing on the BI side. So there's not a lot of two people working on the same dashboard and then integrating that together, although occasionally that happens. That's not the usual. Our biggest integration is with the data engineering sub-team under my manager. So they're doing an awesome job of pulling together data internally from multiple sources and creating reporting tables that are much easier for us to digest, BI-friendly data sources. It makes a big difference. The meetings that we typically have during the week can be about a lot of different stuff, primarily data issues and requirements, maybe things like customer feedback on a new dashboard iteration. We meet for customer training. So we're big into doing whatever it can take, or whatever it takes for user adoption. So those internal training type things are some of our meetings, and we have ongoing office hours, we call them, for any questions that come up. Sometimes there's ad hoc meetings for problem solving and dashboards, just ping somebody in Teams and, hey, can you look at this? I can't figure it out. Or sometimes it's not even just a problem. Somebody gets excited about something they've done and it's like, hey, wow, this is something cool. Do you have time to look at something? And I'm kind of guilty of that a lot. I get in show and tell mode and like to share something recent that's got me excited that I've come up with.
Yeah, you create something that you really like and you're like, oh, hey, take a look at this.
Mm-hmm.
So what kind of data does your team collect and use? For instance, what is the volume of data that you work with, and how do you store the data?
Well, typically I'm dealing order of magnitude on the hundreds of thousands of rows as far as the data I'm ingesting, and it's usually in a similar amount as actually being brought into Tableau. The actual claims data, it's mostly based on claims, that's based on is actually billions of rows. So again, that data engineering team is pulling that together for us and making it more just easier to serve up analytics with. So there's something kind of funny that happens when you're programming, and I do ETL and stuff in SAS usually. So when you get into those large data sets, you can sometimes make a mistake on a join and you end up having your job killed and you get an email that your job was killed with extreme prejudice. So that's kind of a rite of passage at Highmark. You have, once you get that message.
So once you and your team have collected and cleaned the data, you mentioned the data engineering team. What happens next, and how is that data being used?
Well, our primary customers are people who have the title network performance managers. And they are checking how our members are doing and recovering in various post-acute hospital facilities like nursing homes or home health care. So we are looking at all those providers and how the members that are being cared for by those providers are performing. And the network performance managers are looking at dashboards that help them see all that information, and they are interacting directly with those providers on just performance, basically.
Cool. And what do the data scientists produce from the results that you find, like the dashboards, the written reports? I know you mentioned them. Could you go in a little more detail about it?
Let me dial it back to what the customers are doing with the results. So the network performance managers, they may compare one provider to other providers in the same region, or if there is, say, one home health care agency that has maybe 10 different branches, and one is struggling for some reason, they may dig in and do some comparison of one of the provider within a large organization to the others, and make a presentation with a subset of one of the dashboards and talk to the providers about what's going on out there and try to get to the bottom, try to take some action to correct that.
Okay. So I know that you mentioned a few specific software and programming languages that you use. Do you use them very often, like Tableau, Excel, SAS?
Sure. Tableau, I am in probably every day, almost every day, whether it's new development, maintenance, troubleshooting, whatever. SAS, I use kind of off and on. My SAS program includes a lot of proc SQL, so heavy SQL. And at the same time, I use Teradata Studio. So if I'm building a dashboard, what I like to do is create test scripts. So I have basically all the same results in a SQL statement as close as possible, and with a where statement that has all my filters in it. So I have that thing going at the same time. I can look at a dashboard and compare it to results by hitting the database directly and see the difference. I also use other supporting tools, just like typical Office stuff, and I'm a huge fan of Snagit as well for editing screen captures.
Yeah, definitely. I know this question might be kind of difficult to answer, but what technologies would you predict to be most important to know for the future?
Yeah, that is a tough question. Who really knows? I think Tableau's in a very strong position right now, and I see myself using it probably for the rest of my career. Like, what does that mean? 10 or 11 years? Yeah. I'm older than a lot of the users. But yeah, it's going to be around, and the same with Power BI. I don't think they're going anywhere. Absolutely the same thing for SQL, except it's been around longer, right? So I remember learning it in my junior or senior year in college, which means 1989 or 90. So there, it has staying power. To me, it's like math. Math's not going to go anywhere. SQL's not going to go anywhere as long as we have structured data. I don't really use Python and R, but they are used a lot at Highmark. And I think either one of them or both is a good bet, and they will continue to be used. On the data viz side, though, even if tools do change, the principles of data visualization aren't really going to change. They're based on human perception. So I think that's going to keep going on. Also, just in general, business-wide, I think one of the hardest parts is going to remain the same, which is human factors, like both my own and those of my coworkers. So, and what I mean by that is just stuff like, how do you tactfully deliver bad news? Or, are we affected by cognitive biases in our decision making? How well are we communicating with the customers? Just conflict, and how do you prioritize? All those things, that they're going to be around forever, as long as people are around.
Yeah, completely agree, especially on the math, but I'm a little impartial to that.
Oh, one more thing on that, the human factors thing. I have a article on my LinkedIn profile under my featured items called Culture Eats Perks for Breakfast. So it addresses some of those just interpersonal work things and, how people handle those, in my mind, being more important than perks like having, a pinball machine or something.
Yeah, completely agree. So could you talk about a challenge that you or your team had to overcome, and how did you solve it?
That's a good question. Sometimes it's hard to pick or quantify these because like every day is a challenge. So how do you pick one? And another one of my famous lines is, if it was easy, it'd already be done. So, we're typically trying to hit some hard problems. But one that came to mind from not too distant past was aligning goals across 6 dimensions like time, lead type, marketing campaign, county, and a couple other fields. So those goals versus actuals, and having the graph be able to dynamically change based on how people filter. So that was in my prior position. And how I solved it was I actually got some technical mentoring from a very astute director that sent me in the right direction, and that really helped. More recently, I did a project involving gap to goal calculation, which is measuring basically a target rate versus an actual rate, and then the difference in the numerator of that calculation in order to get the entity, whatever we're measuring, to that target. And so these were targets across 3 different metrics, and they changed based on facility type. And I also set it up so that you could dynamically put your own goal in, and it would recalculate everything and color the outliers. And it was a pretty fun project. I got excited about it, and it was just cool to see it come off. And that's kind of one of my mantras, the value of this gap to goal calculation. I have a couple vizzes out on Tableau Public that demonstrate, and I think it's broadly applicable for any entity that you could be measuring that wants to hit some sort of target rate.
Yeah, that sounds extremely interesting to me. I would like to maybe use something like that with my own students to figure out their gaps as well.
Sure. Check it out. I'll send you the links. I have 2 different dashboards that show it. One is in terms of NBA free throws. So like kind of rule of thumb there is 80% is good, right? So it goes out and kind of compares players. I got some data from a 10-year period and shows like who was most efficient. And then I did in Tableau what's called an LOD calculation, level of detail, to see which players basically single-handedly lost games because of their poor free throw shooting. So in other words, like if they would have hit 80%, right, the difference in the number of points they would have scored was greater than the difference in the loss of the game. So yeah, it's kind of it's a dubious distinction.
Yeah, that's cool. So what would you say is the favorite part of your job?
Well, I kind of get the big 3 at Highmark: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So autonomy, I have a lot of say in the work I take on. I get to drive somewhat, how we're making the dashboard. There are standards, but I have a lot of say in that. And I can suggest new projects. And one of them came about, let me go off on a tangent a little bit here. I saw one of our customers presenting in a meeting some of his findings from a dashboard, and what he had done is taken 2 different screenshots and put them together in PowerPoint. And I said, well, bells started going off in my head, and they should for anyone, right? If you see people taking screenshots and mashing together something, it should probably be a view that already exists in your dashboard, right? You need to make that, unless it's like a one-off special case. So I asked him, is this important? Are you going to do this type of stuff a lot? And they said, yeah, we are. I said, I can make that for you. So I used Tableau set operations to compare basically 2 different markets along, I think it's at least 12 different variables. You can slice and dice them on simultaneously and check out all their metrics. and I display them down the center at the same time. Kind of like when you see a sports matchup, right? And they say, what are the keys to the game? And they show them in the center of the screen. They give a check mark on each side who has the advantage. Well, I basically do the same thing in a dashboard. So that's a fun one. So that's all part of autonomy. Mastery, I like to think I'm good at what I do, and I have chance to take time to get better. So I can attend, like 1 hour seminars pretty much whenever I want, if nothing else is going on. Stuff like going to a conference, like the virtual Tableau conference. I need to arrange that because that's several days, but still, that's encouraged. And then the last pillar there is purpose. And at Highmark, we envision a world where everyone embraces health. And I think that's a noble goal and one worth getting behind. So, those three factors pulled together, make it a great job. I'm doing what I love. So it's really good.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I bet it's great to have that autonomy. So if someone was interested in a job like yours, what education or training would you recommend?
If you want to get into data visualization, build a public portfolio, right? Go out there on Tableau Public, make some vizzes, a picture's worth 1,000 words, show people that you can do it, and that will help a lot.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And could you recommend some resources for our listeners to look into?
There's a lot of stuff out there for Tableau specifically. One of my big statements is data viz and SQL can make a career. So just those two together, right? So check out my LinkedIn profile. I have an article there. It's the first one in the featured content, How I Learned Tableau. For SQL, just one quick one is w3schools.com. You can go out there to practice SQL there.
Yeah, I think our listeners are greatly appreciative of those resources there. And were there any hard skills or soft skills you needed in your career that you didn't realize were important when you were a student?
Well, again, when I was a student was a bit of time ago, 30 plus years in computer science. So I tried to reflect back on that. I'd say that there were maybe two things that I wish I would have known better. One is a good understanding of source code management, version control and things like that. I knew nothing about that. And I think a lot of people in analytics come out not knowing so much. So like everyone's using Git, so get out there and learn that and understand how to keep your code in one safe place. Secondly, I'd say not really understanding why software projects fail. I did have one software engineering class, but I don't recall us getting into the common factors that cause software projects to fail. And I would lump analytics in there because there's a lot of overlap. So I encourage people to just get out there, Google it, research it. It's a little frustrating to see these things happen over and over again for like 3 decades, and no one realizes that these things are known, and you can look out for them and try to avoid them.
Yeah. Maybe you could write a little mini book on it.
Yeah, I at least have a post on it. But the top factors are kind of comparing analytics and software projects. Soft skill wise, coming out of school, I was not very strong in that area. So I feel like I've come a long way. And again, I enumerated some of those things in that Culture Eats Perks for Breakfast article. Some of the top ones there, I think, growth areas for me have been valuing and appreciating feedback, and not taking it personally and just, trying to make whatever it is better to some sort of feedback process. Another one is like, if you don't know something, admit it, right away. Don't try to hem and haw or guess at it. Praising publicly and criticizing privately, double checking your own work before suggesting someone else is the one making a mistake. If something's going to be late, oh my gosh, this is so bad among developers. If something's going to be late, let people know as soon as possible. Like as soon as you know it's going to be late, that's when you need to fess up that it's going to be late. Something that just drives people crazy is, telling them on the last day, or some people tell them after it's due. I wonder, why didn't this thing, get in my inbox? Well, it's going to be 3 more weeks. You don't want to be in that position. So things like that have been growth areas for me. I'm in a lot better position than I was 30 years ago. You would hope with 3 decades, one would make some progress. So there you go.
Yeah, those are excellent points, and I hope our listeners are definitely listening to that. You're quite active on LinkedIn, and I know you talked about it quite a bit, but could you tell us a little bit more about how you utilize the platform?
Sure. To me, it's all about helping young analysts with tips. And that's it. I do a lot of posts about Tableau. I think I have a unique voice out there because I combine that with other factors about analytics, about SQL, about getting quick with everyday tools that you use, like the Office suite. And really, that's what my content is about. And I started it during the pandemic and just kind of stuck with it. I focus on introductory advice and kind of just like if something goes wrong for me during the day or something's not obvious and I think it would be helpful for other people to know it, that's what I write about.
Finally, before we let you go, is there anything else that you'd like our listeners to know that we didn't cover today?
Oh, there's a lot of stuff I could talk about, so it depends on like what rabbit hole you want to go down. One is, this is another thing that's been known for 25 years, that limiting the interruptions of knowledge workers can make a huge difference in your productivity. Not just a little difference, I'm talking about doubling your productivity. So if you can, at work, carve out 2 90-minute sessions where you are completely uninterrupted, phone down, notifications off, you are not looking at email, you're not being pinged by Teams, none of that, right? You can get a ton more work done. And that's because knowledge workers take 20 minutes to reach top speed, right? To get in a full state of flow. So limit those interruptions and it will make a huge difference in what you get done. And I have a graph in my Tableau public profile that shows the difference in interruption on the 2 simulated days. I'm one with like random interruptions and one with these 2 90-minute blocks, and how much more you can get done if you allocate those for yourself.
Ray, thank you so much for joining us today. And to all of our listeners, if you haven't already checked out our previous podcasts, they are available wherever you listen to podcasts. For more information about starting a career as a data scientist, go to www.dataanalytics.buffalostate.edu. Don't forget to subscribe so that you get notifications each time we release a new episode of Buffalo State Data Talk.